Hello, everyone. This is Parrish Alford with the Daily Journal. This is the Christmas edition of Double Coverage, a podcast for all things Mississippi State and Ole Miss. We're glad you've chosen to click in with us this morning. The big day is coming up. The big day was this week, actually, for college football teams. It's the new early signing period. We'll talk about that in a few moments. And before we get there, folks, I want to remind you of a couple other podcasts to check out. Be sure to look for the Memo, our news podcast, coming to you every Wednesday and Friday. And check out Prep Rally for all your high school sports needs. That's every Wednesday. And Logan Lowery, who is with me today, is with us every week for Double Coverage. He's our Mississippi State beat writer. Logan, how are you?
Doing good, Parrish. It was a long day yesterday with that signing day. I kind of kept some Parrish Alford hours early in the morning. That alarm went off at 6 o'clock yesterday morning, and I was not very happy about it. And it made for a long day with men's basketball last night as well. So, probably 15, 16 hours of work put in yesterday. So I'm still trying to recover from that. And I've got to get prepared because I'm leaving tomorrow to do some Christmas stuff and some work stuff. I got to go down to Jackson Saturday for men's basketball. Mississippi State's playing Southern Miss down in the Mississippi Coliseum down there, and then come back home, do the Christmas thing, and then I'll be leaving out Christmas afternoon, headed down to Jacksonville for the bowl. So I'm not going to be back home, actually, in my house here in Starkville from tomorrow night all the way to New Year's Eve. So I've got to get a lot of packing done, Christmas stuff, work stuff, got to do some laundry. So a busy day prepared today too.
Logan, we could spend a whole show talking about athletics facilities in the city of Jackson, but I do like the idea that State and Southern are playing there. What do you think? Will fans turn out for that game?
I doubt it. It's a nice thing for people in that area not to have to travel very far. And, Ben Howland actually talked a little bit last night about, hey, it was kind of his idea. He approached Southern Miss about having that game there. And they've got one more game left on the schedule down there again next year against Southern Miss. And he hopes to renew that contract because he likes the idea of playing in Jackson. It's such a hotbed of recruiting, and it's kind of a central location for both schools to play. And, just that facility is just so outdated, and it's a mess, when you're trying to cover as a media person, because there's really no internet down there, and the internet you have to bring with you, and they always pack that up. By the time I get back from the press conference and actually get ready to write and file my story, they've already packed up all the internet stuff and gone. So last time I did that, I had to go to the hotel next door and beg them to use their internet in the lobby to be able to file my story on time.
Well, the Rebels are coming off a big win over Texas A&M. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, it was the Corpus Christi branch, but that was Tuesday night. I was glad, Logan, that they had it the night before signing day. So that was I didn't have basketball to contend with last night as you did. So they were able to space that out a little bit. The Rebels now are just 6-5, and it's very uncharacteristic to find them at that point in the non-conference season. Very unusual for an Andy Kennedy team. Usually you find Ole Miss building up a record in the non-conference and trying to make a push toward the NCAA in the SEC regular season. That's not where this team is. And what we keep hearing from Kennedy is urgency. He wants to see this team play with greater urgency. It's a guard-oriented lineup. They're coming along with their post offense. We're seeing Bruce Stevens, the junior college transfer, make some strides, and he's very skilled, very good offensively in the post. But both Stevens and the Drake transfer 7-footer Dominique Olenichek, who we thought was going to be the starter as they try to replace a very good post player in Sebastian Saiz. It just hasn't worked out. They're still feeling their way around with these guys, trying to find their best options there in the post. And what we're seeing particularly are problems with post defense. Olenichek and Stevens both not really able to handle the quickness of some players that they're getting ready to see down there. So that's one area in which this team really needs to make a step forward. Like I said, the guards are there, but we're not seeing consistency from the guards on a given night. But lots of athleticism. Anyway, enough issues right now to make this a 6-5 team, and some areas they really need to address. I guess, Logan, one of the good things, if you're going to be 6-5 right now, is that the SEC is much improved. The SEC, for years had this knock that it wasn't a very good basketball league. Well, they've addressed that with off-season scheduling, different coaches in the league, things of this nature. It's all added up to the fact that right now there are 5 SEC teams within the RPI top 15. So in years past, when the SEC schedule would not necessarily have worked in Ole Miss's favor, the Rebels will have some RPI opportunity games, quite a few of them, within the conference. But the bad news is they've got to fix some issues before they can win some of those games. But, that is Ole Miss basketball. The women, Lord, I know that State's women just keep rolling along there, Logan, but, the Ole Miss women had won 7 straight. Now they've lost 2 in a row, and they're off for quite a stretch now. I think they don't play again until December 28th. They really were beaten handily at Oregon, 90-46. Just never were competitive in that game. And then they went up the road to Portland State, fell behind, came back, and weren't able to pull it off there in the fourth quarter. So 2 straight losses for the Ole Miss women after about 7 straight wins. Again, not a very athletic team right now, and they're really, I think, beginning to feel the loss of Chandrika Sessom, their second leading scorer. But we'll see. They've got a little time, too, before SEC play starts to work on some things. The Ole Miss men are back in action tomorrow night, Friday night, at the Pavilion against Bradley. Tell us about those Mississippi State ladies, Logan. And, I know we've talked about the depth issues with them. Do you see them making a run as deep as last year? Let's hit the women's basketball, and then we'll get on signing day.
Yeah, they're very good. I mean, they're 12-0 right now, and the win over Oregon was really big for them, and really kind of found out a lot about that team. I mean, they were able to weather that storm, a top 10 matchup, beat Oregon. They went out to UNLV last night and whooped up on them pretty good. I mean, Tierra McCowan is playing so well right now. Her and Victoria Vivians. Vivians has always been able to score points, but she was kind of a volume shooter. This year, she's got better shot selection. Her field goal percentage is way up. And then Tierra McCowan is shed some weight. She's able to play longer minutes, and they need that because they don't really have any other post players that can do the kind of things that she can do. I mean, she's 6'7", and as long as she didn't get into foul trouble, she's going to be a force against anybody that she plays against. And they're playing again tonight. They play against Syracuse tonight, so. That's another big time matchup. Syracuse is a really good basketball team and they're playing out in Las Vegas, and then they'll come home and play Mississippi Valley State after Christmas. But, right now 12-0, they're rolling. I don't know that they're going to I don't know that they're going to contend for a national championship again like they did a year ago. But I can see this team easily making the Sweet 16, Elite 8. I mean, they're that good. It's just, how well they can get things going in the post, and if they can keep Tierra McCowan out of foul trouble. And on the men's side, Mississippi State, is 10-1. They haven't played the toughest schedule. They're playing a lot of teams that, they're ranked in the 200s and 300s in the RPI. So they're picking up wins against some, not so good opponents. But last night, Mississippi State beat Little Rock 64-48. State shot very, very poorly in the first half last night. Shot 24%. And then they came out in the second half and were just like a different basketball team. They scored, they made their first 3 shots to start the second half. The State didn't score, didn't have a field goal for the last 8 minutes of the first half last night. Missed their last 11 shots. And then they come out and hit their first 3 to start the second half and just kind of rolled from there. I mean, they shot over 50% in the second half and just kind of rolled from there. But it was they played Wes Flanagan, who was on Rick Ray's staff. He was an assistant on that staff. They played against Oliver Black, who was a former Mississippi State player. under Rick Ray, and he never really played under Ben Howland. Ben Howland kind of sent him packing about the time he got here. So, it was neat to see those two people come back to the hump. They didn't either have the success that they wanted to, but it was neat when they've had those guys come in. They've played a couple of former players this past year that have since transferred. But Mississippi State's men, like I said, go down to the Jackson on Saturday and play Southern Miss. So I guess we can move on to signing day now. That's probably what a lot of people want to hear about.
Hey, let's talk signing day, Logan. I guess the biggest story, I guess, from the Ole Miss perspective yesterday was the unexpected flip of Callaway defensive end James Williams from Mississippi State to Ole Miss. I want to ask you specifically about that one here in a second, but that was just one part of what was really a surprisingly successful signing day for Matt Luke in his first signing day as head coach. I mean, so much of this recruiting period heading into the first early signing day for the NCAA, new thing this year. For so much of this time, we saw this Ole Miss class ranked 80, 70, in the 60s, something like that. But all of a sudden last week, they were able to get the commitment from Long Beach, California quarterback Matt Corral. Now, he had been a Florida commit, so flipping was kind of the theme for Ole Miss yesterday, able to get some guys to turn to them late in the process. But they were able to add this four-star quarterback, and then that got them in on the receiver who had been committed to Georgia, Elijah Moore, the four-star kid out of Fort Lauderdale. All of a sudden, you're seeing that Ole Miss class rise from about 60 to 35, jumping about 25 spots in the team rankings on signing day. And Logan, coaches will tell you that they don't pay attention to stars and recruiting rankings, and they shouldn't. They do their own evaluations. They go after guys. They target guys that they think are going to fit in the program, that are going to fill needs for them. That's how you do it. But as far as the stars and evaluations go, yes, every now and then you're going to have the stories of the lightly recruited three-star kid or the two-star kid that goes on and excels and has a wonderful college career. But most of the time, those 4- and 5-star kids, those higher-rated kids, most of the time are not busts. Most of the time they go on and do produce at some level through a college career. I think you do need to pay some level of attention to recruiting rankings. It is an inexact science, but when people invest this much money, millions, in the evaluations and the coverage and the time and and the personnel and just the number of recruiting sites out there, there's so much involved in the recruiting coverage industry. When they put that much money into it, they're going to be doing some things right. So I think you do have to give some level of attention to recruiting rankings while remembering that the true measure of a recruiting class comes 1, 2, or 3 years down the road. That's when you really know what you were able to pull into your program on that day. But for now, it was a very good first signing day for Matt Luke as head coach. Like I said, picking up a couple of wide receivers. I think he wants to add one more, he said yesterday. But the big news for Ole Miss, again, if there were 3 guys kind of made the class, it would be, the wide receiver who was committed to Georgia, Elijah Moore, Fort Lauderdale kid, a 4-star, 5'11", 185. Receiver is something they wanted to kind of reload with in this class, Logan. I mean, you've seen how productive that position has been for Ole Miss in recent years and what A.J. Brown was able to do this year, DK Metcalf. All of a sudden, you've got those guys, particularly Brown, in your program for maybe just one more year. They lost Van Jefferson as a transfer. He was their second leading guy in terms of receptions, but he wasn't the big play, the big touchdown guy. He wanted a bigger role, so he transfers. So that position is evolving a little bit. So it's good to see Matt Luke be able to add to it right now. But the big news really in the class, Corral, the quarterback coming from Long Beach, he was early in his recruiting, a USC commit, had been committed to Florida for quite some time. And it looks like as Dan Mullen began to expand the number of quarterbacks he would recruit in this class, that made Corral uncomfortable. Ole Miss got in the game and was able to convince him to to come and be a part of the program. Arm strength is his deal. I mean, they talk about just really above average arm strength with Matt Corral. So we'll see what that means. But really, to bring a quarterback of most likely that caliber into the program, it really leaves Ole Miss in the quarterback situation about the same as it was a year ago. This even after the transfer of Shea Patterson, who was the number one quarterback in the 2016 class. He's gone. He's at Michigan. But with the emergence of Jordan Ta'amu, all of a sudden they have this guy that they believe in and trust, a guy with ability who can run the offense. And behind him is a little bit of an unknown, but some interesting potential. So in many ways, it's just like what they had behind Patterson for 2017, because they didn't really know what they had in Ta'amu until he was forced to be the starter. So all in all, a good signing day for Matt Luke. Got some positions of need that he was able to address. Another one, Vernon Dasher, the junior college linebacker. Linebacker's been a trouble spot for Ole Miss for 2 years. They like the way this guy plays in space. They believe he'll be able to help with pass coverage, and he can still be a big hitter and playmaker. He'll most likely step in and replace DeMarcus Gates. Still trying to find somebody for that middle linebacker spot. It's been a revolving door for 2 years. But all in all, considering NCAA sanctions and scholarship limits, a good signing day for Matt Luke.
Yeah, and you mentioned James Williams earlier. If Mississippi State could afford to lose a player at a position that was on the defensive line, or maybe even one of the tight ends that they signed, but those were the two positions where they had some guys stacked up in this class. And, they've still got a couple of defensive linemen that they didn't sign that are already committed yesterday. But, James Williams also surprised. Mississippi State was counting on getting him. And, it all came down to playing time. And you look at Ole Miss, where Ole Miss is at on their defensive line and where Mississippi State is at on their defensive line. It's going to be probably 2 or 3 years before James Williams was going to get to see significant playing time here in Starkville. So, that's kind of what it came down to. That's what I read in some stuff on him yesterday about why he chose to make the decision that he did. But Mississippi State, Joe Moorhead with his first recruiting class, he kind of it was tough for him. They only had about 3 weeks to connect with some of these guys that were committed, and he also brought in a couple of guys, got a couple of commitments yesterday as well, some big-time commitments on top of that. But Mississippi State signed 15 players yesterday. 9 of them were on the offensive end, and Mississippi State, the theme of the day was wide receivers, and that's something that Joe Moorhead said that he and his staff, his new staff, came in and watched film from last year. They watched some of the bowl practices, and they just thought wide receiver was a position of need for Mississippi State, and that's the direction that they went. A couple of the guys that they signed yesterday, they signed 3 4-star wide receivers, and all of them were 6'3" or taller. So they went out and got some guys. 2 of those were already previously committed to Mississippi State during Dan Mullen's tenure here. Malik Heath, the top player in the state of Mississippi out of Callaway, teammate of James Williams, signed with Mississippi State. He's 6'3", 205-pound guy. And then they also signed Stephen Guidry, who's the number 1 junior college receiver in the country. He's a guy that Mississippi State has been after ever since he was in high school. He signed with LSU out of high school, didn't qualify, ended up at Hines Community College for 3 years, essentially, down there. So it's taken him a while to get out, but he's still got 2 years left to play. Mississippi State's going to get him. He's another big guy, 6'4", 185 pounds. So you get the number 1 player in the state of Mississippi. You got the number 1 junior college receiver in the country. And then you add Devontae Jason. They call him WAP. He's out of New Orleans. He was actually a teammate of Keaton Thompson in high school, and that played a big factor. Devontae Jason was committed to LSU at one point. He was committed to Kansas at one point. He ended up committing to Mississippi State on signing day yesterday, and he's another big-time get, 6'3", 195 pounds. So Mississippi State's just in one day signed 3 receivers that could potentially change the program, and the way that Joe Moorhead loves that play-action pass, and he's going to throw the ball deep down the field a lot more so than what Dan Mullen did in his offense. Their offenses schematically line up the same. They both run the spread offense, but they utilize it so differently. Dan Mullen was a lot of short passes, didn't really utilize the tight end a whole lot. And that's going to change under Joe Moorhead. Joe Moorhead, his favorite target is the tight end. So they went out and signed 3 of those yesterday as well. All of those are 6'4" or taller. Some big guys. Brad Cumbus from down on the coast, Cameron Gardner from here in Starkville, and then a guy in Louisiana, Jacorvius Spivey, 6'4", 220 pounds out of Monroe, Louisiana. That's a place that you're familiar with, Parrish.
Absolutely.
And they signed some guys. They signed a guy from over in from the Delta, Quatravius Johnson, 6'7", 360 pounds. He's the top lineman in the state of Mississippi. So they've got some big time targets on offense. And then you add Mr. Football from the state of Alabama last year on a running back, LaDamian Webb. He rushed for nearly, I forget the number. The numbers that he put up in the last 2 years of his high school career are just unreasonable. I mean, it's just crazy the numbers that he put up. So, they got another running back into the fold. Big time offensive pickups, and then kind of a surprise. On the defensive side of the ball, kind of a late signee yesterday, a guy that we didn't really hear about a whole lot. It was kind of like I said, just a signing day surprise. Shamar Kilby Lane. He's a linebacker out of Hollywood, Florida. He's actually was a 4-star recruit, signed with Florida State, played with Florida State as a true freshman. I think he played in 11 games there as a true freshman. A U.S. Army All-American, big-time recruit. And I don't think he made the grades, ended up at Copiah Lincoln Community College this past season. Kind of flew under the radar. I don't think a whole lot of people knew that he was even there. And so Mississippi State just kind of pulled a signing day surprise and got him a big-time linebacker yesterday. I think they kind of pulled that one up under the rug. I think they may have been the only school that actually knew he was at Copiah Lincoln. So, they kind of pulled a surprise with that. But overall, a very good class. I guess I should mention Jet Johnson from Tupelo, a longtime Mississippi State commitment. He was the final addition to that class. He held a signing day ceremony about 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon. It kind of capped off the class at 15. But, a really good class. Looking at the recruiting services, one of which I used to work for, Rivals.com, they have Mississippi State at the highest at 17. ESPN has Mississippi State's class at number 20, and 24/7 has Mississippi State's class at 21. So ranked 21 or higher in all the recruiting services. Mississippi State had a really good class. They've got 4 or 5 scholarships left to play with. Joe Moorhead said it was kind of a fluid situation, which positions they would probably go after. If I had to guess, they're probably going to go after a cornerback. They're going to go after a couple of offensive linemen, and just kind of shore up those positions. But it's just going to be a kind of a fluid situation how they use those scholarships. But I know they need some more offensive linemen, and they need some cornerbacks.
Matt Luke says he believes he'll sign 8 or 9 in the late signing period. We say late; it's coming up in about 6 weeks. So anyway, I would look for Ole Miss to go after offensive linemen. Then we'll see. I failed to mention that they really like Scotty Phillips, the junior college running back, that they believe can step in and help fill the void created by Jordan Wilkins. That's going to be a big troublesome position for Ole Miss next year, Logan, running back, because Wilkins was the guy. And frankly, behind him this year, Devon Penniman and Eric Swinney just did not see much consistency. In that battle for number 2, that kind of went back and forth between those guys. Now you throw into it Penniman's injury. Swinney has not looked the same, coming off 2 major injuries. Lots of unknown in those guys behind Wilkins, and now Wilkins is gone. So, any new blood coming into the running back room for Ole Miss will have a chance to get on the field and compete. Folks, that's going to wrap us up for this edition of the Christmas edition of Double Coverage. We will not be with you next week, as Logan and I will both be out of pocket. Logan, when's the bowl game, man? You'll be doing bowl coverage, and I'll just be taking a few accumulated holidays. When is the bowl game?
The bowl game's on December the 30th, so I actually head down there Christmas afternoon. Going to spend the whole week in Jacksonville. Practice starts on the 26th, and Mississippi State wrapped up practice this past Tuesday, so they're going to actually take a few days before Christmas, and everybody will kind of meet up here. And the ones that are actually flying on with the team, they'll meet here in Starkville Christmas afternoon, fly down there, and start practice up the next morning at the University of North Florida.
Well, the good news is you know your way around the Gator Bowl, don't you, Jacksonville? You're
I
familiar with
do.
that.
I do.
Okay. Hey, folks, that's it for this edition. We thank you for being with us today. Come back and join us the first week of January.